Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I should add that the cost of that Thursday class is $25 a month or $8 a class, and it's payable through my website, through PayPal or Wave, or I don't remember, but it all ends up in my bank account minus their fees. So I'm happy about that too. And if you have any questions about that, let me know. I'm glad to be here tonight. You can see, I just noticed in the lower right corner, this was scheduled for February 15th. And we were not in any position.
It was our ice storm week.
Oh my gosh, that was the beginning of the debacle.
Yep.
We were out of electricity till Thursday of that week. So there was no way that you would have seen this. So, golly. I am here to just share information that I've accrued over the years, seeking to improve my own health and wellness. I just turned 70 a couple of weeks ago, and I have learned over the years of not being as careful as I could have been with my nutrition that there is a penalty to pay. And it may not be right away, but it can be over time. So I'm not here to give you medical advice or direct you in any way. Again, I'm just sharing information. I think we all would agree that food has a profound impact on our health. Food is the basis of everything that happens in our bodies, in our cells, tissues, and organs. And food provides all of the raw building blocks and metabolic materials for every reaction that happens in your body every day, every moment, every second. It's a life-sustaining thing that we do, is eat. We need to be thinking, instead of specific diets like Atkins or paleo or whatever, about having a nutrient-dense diet. And that is food that contains macronutrients, which we know is fat, protein, and carbohydrate. They also, food also contains micronutrients that are vitamins, minerals, amino acids, essential fatty acids, and antioxidants, and vitamin-like chemicals that are derived from fruits and vegetables. We know that fat-soluble vitamins include A, D, E, and K. Water-soluble vitamins are all of the Bs, and there's quite a few. And there are minerals that are essential to our health. They're known as macro or trace, and they're listed for you there. We know that nutrient insufficiencies account for quite a lot of our population. And when this was evaluated a few years ago, this group looked at regular foods, fortified foods, and supplements. And what was discovered in the general population here in the United States is that there's a high number of people who are very deficient in vitamin D, magnesium, and calcium, vitamin A and C, and then less so in vitamins B and 6 and 9, as well as zinc, and some of the other B vitamins and minerals. Well, what's the impact on our health and wellness when we have insufficient nutrients? The first thing, and I had this for years, is iron deficiency anemia. When I was menstruating, I used to try to donate blood, and often I was turned away because my iron levels were not high enough. Heart disease is something that is rampant in westernized cultures. And we know from research that deficiencies in B9 create high homocysteine levels, which impair endothelial function. And the endothelium is the lining of the blood vessels in your body. Homocysteine is an inflammatory marker in your blood that can be measured easily. We know that a deficient diet can increase our susceptibility to infection, specifically zinc. can impair that function. We also know that many autoimmune diseases, and there are dozens and dozens of them, can be the result of insufficiencies in our diets. Also, thyroid disorders, as well as vision problems, birth defects, and colorectal and other cancers. Vitamin D has been shown to be a very important aspect of nutrient density, and many doctors are now waking up to that fact and recommending much higher doses of vitamin D, whether it's by supplement or prescription, than they used to do. If you see any words in there that you don't know, let me know. Like apoptosis, one of my favorite words. I like that word, apoptosis. There's a powerful impact on our immune system when we do not have the nutrients that we need to support it. Dysfunctional immune systems can create openings for all kinds of problems, including viruses, as we know, and bacteria. And balance through the entire system helps to regulate both of these systems, the innate and acquired, or non-specific and acquired immune systems, so that our bodies can stand up to the intruders. Not only that, but our bodies will turn off the immune response when it's appropriate. We also know that chronic inflammation caused by dysregulation of our immune system contributes to pathology of many types of events, such as chronic infection and illness, hormone imbalances. Diets heavy with pro-inflammatory food are certainly contributors, not getting enough sleep, as well as nutrient deficiencies. Another big area of problem is chronic stress. Chronic stress is a big driver of immune difficulties and compromise. We know that immune responses that are decreased can possibly contribute to obesity. We see that there are certain nutrient deficiencies that are more common among people who are obese, specifically vitamins D and B1. And any vitamins, still a lot of studies going on about regulation of appetite. And, you know, I'm glad I didn't give this almost 2 months ago, because I was thinking this afternoon as I reviewed, I want to talk a little more about stress. I used to work for a doctor's office about 25 years ago, and they had, I ran a small wellness center that was geared for their patients who were 65 and older. And these women started coming in with diagnoses of fibromyalgia and asking if I had ever heard of it. And it was something that I knew about because both of my sisters had called me and said that they had recently been diagnosed with fibromyalgia. And I knew a lot of the history of my two sisters and their lives and things that had happened to them. So I began asking, did your symptoms come on after a time of stress? And almost everyone said yes. So I began to understand, just from my own observation, that unmitigated stress is a big driver of a lot of problems that are not well addressed through Western medicine. There is no drug treatment I know of that will cure, for example, fibromyalgia. As I studied this, I learned that Thomas Holmes and Richard Rahe, back in 1967, they were psychiatrists that were examining post-traumatic stress disorder Vietnam veterans. They looked at more than 5,000 patients and asked them a lot of questions and developed a scale of 43 life events and asked these patients to evaluate with a response if any of these things had happened to them. And each one of the events was assigned a score. And as the scores were added up, the higher the score, the more likely a person would become ill in the next few months or years. And the link there is for you to take that. I was very surprised when I was teaching a health class at the University of Houston some years ago that many of the students in the class, there were almost 100 of them, I would get information back as grades especially were coming due that I can't get less than an A in this class because, and then there would be these reasons why they had to have an A. And I would tell all my students at the beginning of the semester, you have an A in this class until you prove to me otherwise. So they had to do their assignments, they had to get good scores on their tests, and I was a pretty hard teacher. But many of them, when they took this test to determine their levels of stress, were shocked to find out how high their stress levels were. And in students, I think it's a matter of expectation. That's just the way life is. Parental pressure, money pressures, any of those things create stress. And my big suggestion, and I've read many articles about how to manage your stress. Don't manage it. If there's something that you can get rid of, then do it. If it's a bad friendship, a bad relationship, whatever you can dump, I recommend dumping it. I can't say you can do that with your kids.
That's what I was
or
just
whatever. Yeah, but there's a lot of things that we take on that we do not need to do. So I would say if you're one of these people, if you take this test and you get a high score, then I would do some serious self-talk and evaluate what you can do to improve your stress levels. So the answer to all of these questions is we need to be looking at nutrient density. We need to make sure that whatever we're putting in our mouths that feed us is quality as well as quantity. We need to be getting enough of the right things. We know also in our culture that there are strong differences. For example, these people in Papua New Guinea eat all kinds of stuff that we would think would be off limits for us, but their incidence of cardiovascular disease is very, very low, even though most people there smoke. We know that the Inuits in Alaska and way far north have also very low levels of cardiovascular disease, even though they have diets that are very high in saturated fats. Why is that? During the 1920s and 30s, a dentist named Dr. Weston Price traveled the world to find out why other people in other places had beautiful teeth and his patients' teeth were decaying and falling out of their mouths and their teeth did not fit their mouths or their mouth didn't fit the teeth. What he found in these pre-industrialized societies were people that had all of their teeth present and healthy, and their dental arches were very wide and accommodating for all of the teeth. Every adult should have 32. The palate of these groups was flatter and broader, and their facial structures were wider, which allowed for unobstructed breathing. And I'm wondering how many of you experience COPD at night or using machines to help you keep breathing through the night? How many of you have chronic sinus infections and so on? And what Dr. Price learned is that most of these people had a very high density diet that involved a lot of chewing. So the muscles in the face that help to manipulate the jaw were well developed, and their diets were more than 10 times higher in fat-soluble vitamins that were obtained from these sources. In addition to that, which I think is fascinating, there was a very high value given to the nutrition of both parents before a child was conceived. And after the child was born, there was spacing of children to make sure that the mother's health could be restored. He saw that among all of these populations, people were healthy, they were lean and emotionally stable. They did not suffer from diabetes, cardiovascular disease, or cancer. He found that modernized diets very quickly cause facial deformities in children so that their jaws were narrow, their teeth were crooked and crowded, and they were compromised in their immune systems and susceptible to chronic disease. So that you can see this for yourself, he was very careful to document. You can see the beautiful teeth and the wide palates and faces and the gorgeous dental arches of these two people on the left. And then eventually the compromise that can occur very quickly with nutrient inefficient diets, insufficient diets. I have a resource slide at the end for you to go look at these things. What is it about us in the West that we have this diet that creates so many problems? In her wonderful book, and this is what I started to draw my information from, called Paleo Principles. And she no longer advocates a complete paleo diet, but her name is Sarah Ballentine. And she is one of the best researchers I've ever seen. She has quite an extensive background in nutrition and research. She has put into remission, I can't remember how many autoimmune diseases that she has had over time. She has partnered with somebody else named Stacy Toth, and the two of them have pursued initially a paleo lifestyle and have a regular podcast with excellent information called now the Whole View. It used to be called the Paleo View. And they've moved away from paleo as an eating idea and moved to something they call a whole diet, a nutrivore way of approaching food. And they call it nose to tail eating. And I would recommend this book. It's almost 700 pages, carefully researched and well written with all kinds of information about nutrition. We know that here in the United States that the Food and Drug Administration has been very busy over many years to give the population guidelines for eating, and those have been modified over time. And what Dr. Ballentine has found is that we fall far short on diets that include the micronutrients that we need to sustain good health. We see this relative to the rise in chronic disease, as well as the reduction of quality of soil, the increased use of antibiotics and growth hormones in our food chains, and the use of all kinds of pesticides, fungicides, and herbicides. And I see I have a misspelled word there. I'll go back and correct that. We also know that the more processing and refinement food goes through, there's more and more loss of nutrients. In addition to that, that type of processing can add other elements to a food, which can either hinder our health or even compromise it. And one of my favorite podcasts from the Whole View that Dr. Ballentine put together is called Aspartame or Aspartame is Evil. And if you need a reason to stop using that, be sure to listen to that podcast. They recommend, Dr. Ballentine, energy-dense foods that do not have any of these things in them, because the standard American diet is truly sad. Here's what's happened over the years for those of you who may not be aware. The history of dinner plate size back in the 1960s was an 8.5-inch plate, which is what we would consider now to be a luncheon plate. Mm-hmm. And over time, it's increased to a 12-inch plate. I heard a few years ago of a family that moved into a home and had to have the cabinets in the kitchen replaced because they were built to accommodate the smaller dinner plate. And their large plates did not fit the cabinets. Huh. So you can see on the photo on the right that has also had an impact on how we fill our plates with food. Here's another thing that's happened over the years is that our portion sizes have increased, and with that goes a caloric increase as well. So we have huge increases in calories coming from food sources that are not healthy. And if you add the top calories from then and compare them to adding up the calories of now, it's quite a significant difference. We see that in all types of things. The original bottle of Coca-Cola was 8 ounces, and now most people purchase a 20 ounce or bigger. If you got a regular size bagel today, you would think you were being cheated. It's about a quarter of the size of a regular bagel. Popcorn in the theater. How many of you like to purchase a large bucket and drench it in whatever that yellow stuff is that goes on top that makes it taste so yummy? And burgers. And on the right side is still more comparisons. We think often when we buy something out or go out to dinner that we're being cheated when we see a very large dinner plate, sometimes larger than the 12 inches that you just saw, that are, we feel like it has to be filled with food. And let me say here that one strategy, if you go out to eat like that, is to ask for a to-go box right away and take half of your food and put it in that to-go box and then eat what you have left. Dr. Ballentine, in her Paleo Principles book, recommends that you eat color. It's one thing that she says that the federal, FDA, Food and Drug Administration, has omitted from its thinking, is that color means a lot because those colors indicate the presence of phytochemicals and precursors that help vitamins and minerals become active in the body and be absorbed. And she recommends 2 to 3 servings every day from each of the color groups. And she puts them together in blue and purple, green, red, orange, and yellow, and white. Now you would look at that and think, ooh, 2 times 4 groups would be a minimum of 8 servings. That's a lot of food, but that's why I'm glad I waited from February to do this, because what is 1 cup? It's my little Tupperware stack of cups. And I often stop to measure my food. But if you take your fist and you form it into a fist, that's about the size of a cup. If you look at the palm of your hand and you consider the size of that, that's roughly the size of a 3-ounce serving of meat or protein. Your thumb tip is about 1 teaspoon, and your whole thumb or a lipstick tube is about 1 ounce. So if you're thinking of an ounce of cheese, it would not be bigger than your thumb. 2 tablespoons. It's the size of a golf ball, and that's generally considered to be a serving for something like nut butter or half and half, or milk in your coffee. This little thing that I've had, I put green in the water so you could see it. It's the smallest storage container that Rubbermaid makes. Any guess how much this is? 4 ounces, 1/2 cup. A tennis ball. That looks bigger to me than a 1/2 cup, but it's about a 1/2 cup of vegetables. Some things are 2/3. So you can use your hand as a guide for serving size. And you also need to be looking at the nutrition label on whatever you're eating. And if you're not familiar with how to look at the label, the FDA has recently revised these labels and given a lot of information about how to understand them. The first thing to look at is how big is a serving size and how many are in this container. And this little bag of chips that I have is 2 ounces, and 1 ounce is 1 serving. But most people would pick this up and eat the whole bag.
Mhm.
and boom, you've had 2 servings. The next thing I like to look at is what's in this. The nutrition facts label won't tell you, but I want to know, is this processed highly? Has it got stuff added in it? And labels now contain information about what is in it that may be an allergen. That's very common to most people. On this label, you'll also see some information about carbohydrate, protein, and fat, as well as some vitamins and minerals, but it doesn't give you the whole story. It's a start. And another thought I have goes back to a seminar I went to as a personal trainer many years ago. A geriatric physician was talking about how do you deal with an elderly person who's losing weight? And typically we would say, are you eating? Or what are you eating? What have you eaten today? He said the wiser question is, can you eat? The reason is that often people with chronic illness or maybe on medications that change taste, they may be depressed, they may have been traumatized, and there may be a loss of the dental structure. Just was listening to a man who's I've also put in the references a few months ago. His name is James Nestor, and he began talking about himself and his snoring at night. And as he walked through the orthodontia he'd had as a child, I kept thinking, he's describing me. He's talking about me. When I was in 5th grade, I had such a bad overbite, I could literally stick my thumb between the back of my upper teeth and the front of my lower teeth. And dentists would wring their hands and say, you need to see an orthodontist. Your teeth are too big for your mouth. I ended up having 4 baby teeth pulled to encourage the faster growth of the 4 permanent teeth behind them. And when those came in, I also had those pulled and braces slapped on my teeth. I have been through a lot of mouth trauma, and it's no wonder that I have been a tooth clencher, a jaw grinder for decades. And it ended up costing me one of my molars. Even though I wore a night guard for years, I would land on that tooth and stay there for 8-10 hours a night. And eventually the gum became so inflamed that, what do you call them? Oral surgeon said, you got to get that tooth out. I'm not sure that that still even needed to happen. So instead of 32 beautiful, well-spaced teeth, I have 23. 23.
Wow.
And I have to say, my oil story is that when I started using On Guard toothpaste and mouthwash, my dental hygienist said, your gums are beautiful. Yes,
Yay.
gums are beautiful. No bleeding at all when I go in for a visit. So if you come across somebody who is having difficulty with food, you can ask, can you eat? That would be the first question. And the next one follow up would be, what are you eating when? Another thing I put in this afternoon is years ago, back in the doctor's office, when I had all these 65-plus-year-olds, many women were very concerned about weight loss. So I began investigating that. And as a personal trainer and somebody in fitness for quite a long time, even then, I had not found anything that had really worked for anybody for a long period of time. In fact, I heard about this approach to nutrition from a woman who was the wellness director at Conoco in Houston. And she was in charge of their wellness program. And she said, we cannot get people to lose weight. We cannot get people to come in and regularly exercise, to maintain weight loss, no matter what the incentives are that we get. They just can't do it. It's very, very difficult. But she recommended this book to me. It's called Overcoming Overeating, and it's been in publication for a long time. And I set up a couple of groups of women in the Wellness Center who were very interested in understanding some of the reasons why they tended to overeat. The authors, I think they're clinical psychologists, state that their work helps to break these cycles of binging and dieting and help women especially move towards self-acceptance and walk away from body hatred. And some of the practical steps that they offered was to have people develop a timeline of trauma over the course of their lives, and then to ask the question, did weight gain or weight loss accompany that event? And often people were very surprised to find that there was a connection. Another thing that the authors recommended is to have something that they call a food bag. Many people are concerned about going on a diet because they worry about being hungry and not feeling well. So they recommend taking whatever receptacle you want to use, whether it's a lunch bag or a box or whatever, and filling it with small portions of foods that you enjoy, and having those ready as soon as you have an experience of true hunger to have something available for you to eat. But you learn to eat so that you savor. One of the little things that they ask us to do is put a raisin or a craisin in our mouths and hold it, and hold it until we felt the response of salivation. And then to move that little thing side to side in our mouths and play with it with our tongues. And after a while, then to bite it and sense the intense sensation of flavor that came from it. And then to chew it very carefully and swallow it. And then to do that with some of the foods people thought they could not resist. And I remember one woman, I bought all the food and brought it in. One woman said, I cannot have Sara Lee cheesecake in my house because I'll eat it all. And I laughed and brought it in. And so she put a little piece of it in her mouth and held it there and moved it around with her tongue and spit it out. She said, it is so greasy and so sweet. I just never stopped to appreciate the texture or the flavor of it. The last thing is to understand the differences of mouth hunger, emotional hunger, and true hunger. True hunger means that your stomach is growling, that you have had enough time, literally time between your last eating and your stomach growling, that your system is ready to have food. And one woman said, you know, I don't think I've ever really been hungry. I have never gotten to the point where I've experienced true hunger. But often people will find themselves standing at the refrigerator door because they have mouth hunger, and they will go through a cabinet to find out where is that thing that's salty or crunchy or sweet or creamy or hot or cold. And we don't stop till we find it. And the next thing we know, we've eaten way too much. Same is true for emotional hunger. Here's the references. Dr. Price's website contains the photographs that I showed you. Overcoming Overeating is there. Sarah Ballentine in her book. Sarah Ballentine, another reason I really, really like her a lot, she has published a ton of free information on her website. And many websites I've been to when I've been seeking information about some of my own difficulties ask you to pay. You know, they'll give you a little hook, but they ask you to pay for a lot. James Nestor, the author of Breath, who he and I share similar dental stories, his book is now out. It's available on Audible and probably Kindle. And his website has some information. You can look at the book if you go onto Amazon. You can scroll through some of it. And his website also has some breathing videos that you can try. He was part of a very interesting experiment where he had his nose completely jammed with something that blocked his ability to breathe through his nose for weeks. And the description of having all that stuff hauled out of his nose was really quite interesting. So your nose is important. Anyway, all that said, any questions, any concerns?
That was great information. Oh my goodness. I've already had people request the recording that are listening to you, Becky. So see, we want to get this information in our heads. Great. And I've got other people that couldn't make it tonight. But yes, questions.
So Becky, you talked about the micronutrients, the macronutrients, that sort of thing. And I hadn't really heard anything much about that you needed a certain amount of both, and it could vary from person to person. Do you have any good recommendations on reading up on that and finding, what works best for people?
And I would say not only will it vary person to person, but person to person as an individual, it will vary day to day, morning to night, depending on your activity and your stress levels. So one of the things, for example, I had my hip replaced a few years ago, and I was seeing a really good naturopath, and she said, don't say I said this, but take X amount of vitamin D and you can buy it in these types of things, because what we're beginning to learn about vitamin D is that it's excellent for helping people get through the pre and post trauma of surgery, that your body just really sucks vitamin D and needs it to help rebuild and restore. I know the same is true of vitamin C. If you're getting sick, your body uses quite a lot of vitamin C, and I think people can look and find places online that are reliable and timely with good information about levels of vitamin C to take. The first place, though, I would go is Sarah Ballentine and read what she has to say, and listen to a lot of different resources about any of that.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah, other questions? That was excellent.
And always, always, let me say this, always talk to your healthcare provider. They are the ones who have the final say, and you need to listen to them and account for their contribution to your overall healthcare too. They don't know everything, and they're learning just like everybody else. But I would say research as much as you can, because in this business of healthcare, you are your own best and strongest advocate.
When it comes to vitamin D, you can get a great source of that if you're not getting enough in your food and you're not getting enough sunshine, something that I think a lot of us here in Texas don't get because it's so hot when it's sunny that we don't spend a lot of time out in the sun. Our doTERRA's Lifelong Vitality and their bone nutrient in the women's products are an excellent source of vitamin D and vitamin C as well.
Yep.
And Lee, as you said that, it makes me think to say that sunscreen will block sunlight's action for vitamin D.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So make your own with oils and shea butter. And then you're going to get sunscreen, but you're not going to get the chemicals that block that.
Mm-hmm. I've also heard that the baby diaper rash ointment that doTERRA makes works as a great sunscreen. Thought that was interesting. So,
Becky, I've got a question for you about doing high doses of vitamin C. How do you buffer the stomach with that?
I think that's going to be a highly individualized approach, and there are different types of vitamin C. There's liposomal, which I think might be the fat,
Okay.
fat assimilated, as well as the regular vitamin C ascorbate, which is water soluble from what I understand. So it may be a difference in the type of vitamin C that you take, or the spacing of it. Do you take it with food or without food? How much are you taking? I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, but it is a real problem. And I think Elizabeth's question is good, because if you read websites that say find your tolerance to vitamin C, that means you take a lot of it every 30 minutes until you get diarrhea. And that's your tolerance level.
interesting.
Or your stools get loose. That should probably be a better thing to say than diarrhea, but
Yeah.
it definitely, too large of a dose can definitely have an effect on your bowels and your gut.
What about vitamin D? Because that's not usually a water soluble one, or one that I call it a potty vitamin, one that your body, like B and so on, your body will take these out before they become
Get through.
toxic, but they
Yeah.
don't DNA.
The research that I've seen recently on that, and I think Sarah Ballentine supports that, is that the levels of vitamin D that were previously thought to be adequate are probably too low. And I think there's some really good research you could probably find easily on a site like PubMed, or ask your doctor. Many doctors, I think, are getting wise to prescribing vitamin D. I know it's available in some quality supplements if you want to go that route, but I definitely would check that out with your healthcare provider.
Okay.
And it is a fat soluble vitamin. And I think I read recently that it's considered to be a hormone or an enzyme and not a true vitamin. The way that it acts in the body, it comes in two forms that are recommended, D2 and D3. And yeah, vitamin K is recommended as one of the things to supplement with the D to help it become more active and available in the body.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Mhm.
Oh, you are a wealth of information. Thank you so much, Becky. Everybody, give her a round of applause. Thank you
Thank
so
you for your
much.
time. And yeah,
Yeah, you are just
pleasure.
a wealth of knowledge and so much more that we can explore and learn. I have a daughter-in-law that runs her Facebook group talking about macros and micros and eating right. And I haven't jumped into it because it just sounds foreign to me. So to hear you talk about it so knowledgeably, it's wonderful. And I need to learn more. Thank you all for being here tonight. So thankful. Do you like my backdrop? That's my bed. I'm in my bedroom now because I have grandchildren living in my house. So my office is up in my bedroom. So excuse my bed in the background.
Quilt.
Huh?
It's a pretty quilt.
Oh, I know. My mother did a beautiful job. Anyway, we're so thankful that you're here. Next week, we are going to be hearing from Lisa Seitz about listening to our body and being able to give it what it needs when it comes to essential oils. So I think that's going to be a great topic for next week. Please join us next week and please stay on for our business call right now because we will be